How did the proud second prince of the Pride Lands become the scheming, shadowy Scar we all know? Was he born a villain? The story is far more complicated than you might think. Before he was Scar, he was Taka. And his life, along with his entire family's, was turned upside down the day his little brother Mufasa was born. Let's go back to the beginning. The king of the Pride Lands was a Hadi, and his queen was Iru. Their firstborn son was named Taka. As the first in line to the throne, Taka was the center of his parents' world. He was confident, maybe a little arrogant, but he was the future king. He spent his days learning from his father, a Hadi, about the circle of life, the responsibilities of a ruler, and the delicate balance of their kingdom. Everything seemed perfect. Taka was destined for greatness, and Ignu Italiano. Then, one day, everything changed. Queen Uru gave birth to a second son, a healthy, golden-furred cub. They named him Mufasa. From the moment Mufasa was born, the atmosphere in the royal den shifted. King Ahadi took one look at his new son and saw the future. Mufasa was strong, charismatic, even as a tiny cub, and his golden coat seemed to shine with the light of the sun itself. In the king's eyes, Mufasa was the perfect heir, the very image of what a Pride Lands king should be. Suddenly, Taka was no longer the sole focus of his father's attention. All the lessons, all the praise, all the promises of the throne began to drift towards his younger brother. Ahadi started spending more and more time with Mufasa, teaching him the same lessons he had once taught Taka. But this time, there was a different kind of pride in Ahadi's voice, a special glimmer in his eye that Taka had never seen before. Taka, the firstborn, was being pushed aside. The jealousy started as a small seed, but it was watered every day by his father's favoritism. You might be wondering, what about their mother Uru? Uru loved both her sons deeply, but she could see the growing shadow in Taka's heart. She tried her best to comfort him, to reassure him that he was still loved, still important. She would tell him stories and remind him of his own strengths. But a mother's love, as powerful as it is, couldn't compete with a father's approval, especially when that father was the king. Taka felt that no matter what he did, he could never measure up to the golden child, Mufasa. As the brothers grew, the gap between them widened. Mufasa was everything. Taka wasn't. He was popular, effortlessly charming, and a natural leader. The other animals of the Pride Lands were drawn to him. Taka, on the other hand, became more withdrawn and resentful. He started seeking out a company that his family wouldn't approve of specifically. A trio of mischievous hyenas named Shenzi Bonsai and Ed. With them, Taka felt he felt powerful. They didn't judge him or compare him to his brother. They just listened to his complaints and laughed at his dark jokes. They became his confidants, his only real friends. This friendship was a turning point. It was Taka's first real act of rebellion against his father's world. He knew Ahadi despised hyenas and saw them as chaotic scavengers who disrupted the circle of life. By befriending them, Taka was not just finding companionship, he was rejecting his father's values. He was building his own circle, a shadow kingdom, where he was the one in charge. His resentment wasn't just about Mufasa anymore. It was about the entire system that had cast him aside. One fateful day, Taka's bitterness boiled over. He devised a plan to make Mufasa look weak and foolish in front of their father. He tricked his brother into confronting a grumpy old water buffalo named Boma, convincing Mufasa that it was a test of bravery. The plan was simple. Mufasa would get into a little trouble, and Taka would swoop in to save him, proving his own worth to Ahadi. But things went horribly wrong. Boma, enraged, charged not at Mufasa, but at Taka. Mufasa, true to his noble character, immediately leaped to defend his brother. Intachao's Taka was struck by the buffalo's horns, receiving a deep gash over his eye. When King Ahadi arrived, he didn't see a son who had made a mistake. He saw a son who had endangered the future king. His reaction was cold and furious. He barely tended to Taka's wound. Instead of comfort, Taka received a harsh lecture. And then, he gave himself a new name. From now on, he declared, his voice dripping with venom, call me Scar. It will be a reminder of my father's mistake. The name was a permanent mark of his pain, a symbol of his family's betrayal. Taka was gone forever, and in his place stood Scar. This event solidified everything. The scar on his face was an outward sign of the deep emotional wound within. His family had been fractured long before, but this was the moment it shattered completely. Mufasa felt guilty, but he couldn't understand the depth of his brother's hatred. Ahadi saw Scar's new name as a final act of defiance, further confirming that Mufasa was the rightful heir. And her heart broke for the son she was losing to darkness. Scar now dedicated his life to one single goal: taking the throne that he believed was stolen from him. His friendship with the hyenas grew stronger. They became his army, his enforcers in the shadows. He whispered promises of power and endless food, preying on their hunger and their outcast status. Together, they plotted and schemed, waiting for the right moment to strike. The circle of life that Mufasa was destined to protect, Scar was determined to break. Years passed. Ahadi and Uru grew old, and eventually passed away. Mufasa, as destined, became the great and noble king of the Pride Lands, with his wise queen Sarabi by his side. They had a son, Simba, and the kingdom rejoiced. But in the shadows, Scar watched. The birth of Simba was the final insult. Not only had he been passed over for his brother, but now his brother's son was next in line, pushing Scar even further into obscurity. This was the catalyst for his most infamous and tragic plan. He used his cunning to manipulate his innocent nephew, Simba, luring him into a gorge. He then commanded his hyena army to trigger a wildebeest stampede. Just as he had planned years ago with the buffalo, he created a crisis. Mufasa, ever the hero, rushed in to save his son. He managed to get Simba to safety, but he was left clinging to the cliff edge, exhausted and vulnerable. And who was there waiting for him? His own brother. "Brother, help me," Mufasa pleaded. Scar looked down at him, his green eyes glowing with a lifetime of hatred. He dug his claws into Mufasa's paws. "Long live the king," he whispered, and threw his brother into the stampede below. In that moment, Scar's transformation was complete. The jealousy that began with one look at his newborn brother had culminated in the murder of that brother. He had finally seized the power he craved, but it was a throne built on lies and stained with blood. The tragedy of Scar is not just that he was a villain, but that he was made into one. The constant favoritism from his father, the feeling of being replaced, and the lack of validation twisted a proud young prince into a monster. It's a dark reminder that even in the majestic Pride Lands, family dynamics can create the deepest scars of all. Changed everything. Today, we rediving deep into the untold story of Scar's family and the day Mufasa's birth altered their destiny forever. Long before the Pride Lands knew the names Mufasa and Scar, there was just Prince Taka. He wasn't born with a scar on his face or bitterness in his heart. He was the second son of King Ahadi and Queen Uru, a curious and clever cub, always trailing after his older brother, Mufasa. In the golden light of the African savannah, they were inseparable. Taka, smaller than Wairi, was the strategist, the thinker. He saw patterns in the herd's movements that others missed and knew the secret paths through the outlands. Their parents, Ahadi and Uru, ruled with a balanced hand. Uru, however, was the heart of the kingdom. He didn't covet the throne, he coveted his role. But Taka had another family, a secret one, hidden away in the quieter parts of the Pride Lands. He had found a companion in a young lioness named Zira. Zira was an outcast, her pride scattered long ago, a mind sharper than any lion she'd ever known. Together, they had a son, a small, frail cub they named Nuka. Zira and Nuka were Taka's world, a private joy he kept separate from the pressures of the royal court. But as the son of the king's most trusted advisor and the leader of the Lion Guard, it was a humble but happy future he planned for them. Then came the day of the presentation. A new cub was to be presented to the kingdom, but it wasn't a royal birth. The entire kingdom buzzed with an energy Taka had never felt before. This wasn't just any cub. Taka stood beside his parents under beaming Mufasa on Pride Rock. He felt a genuine surge of joy for his brother. He watched as Rafiki, the wise mandrill, lifted the small, golden cub into the air for all to see. And in that moment, as the assembled animals bowed and cheered for the newborn prince, Simba, Taka's wool tilted on its axis. He looked at Mufasa. His brother was no longer just his brother. He was a father, a king, the center of the universe. The love and adoration pouring from the crowd wasn't just for Mufasa. It was for his lineage, his heir. Taka followed Mufasa's gaze, which was fixed solely on his son, Simba. It was a look of pure, unconditional love, a look of promise, a look that sealed the future. And in that instant, Taka understood. He wasn't the king's brother and chief advisor anymore. He was the king's brother and the uncle to the next king. His position, his relevance, had just been halved. The path he had envisioned, standing by Mufasa's side, was now crowded. Simba would grow up, and Mufasa's focus would shift to mentoring his own son. Taka's role as the primary advisor would inevitably diminish. A cold dread seeped into his heart. He thought of Zira and Nuka. His promise to them suddenly felt fragile. How could he secure a place of honor for his unconventional family when his own influence was destined to fade? Nuka, his frail son, would be compared to the perfect, golden prince Simba, and he would always fall short. They would be seen as a secondary, lesser branch of the family, forever living in the shadow of Mufasa's perfect heir. The cheering of the crowd sounded like a roar in his ears. The sunlight glinting off Pride Rock seemed to mock him. Every bow from the zebras and giraffes felt like a confirmation of his new, reduced status. He looked at his own paws and felt, for the first time, a bitter sting of resentment. It wasn't just about power or the throne. It was about his place in the world, his family's future, and the promise he had made to the ones he loved. That night, he returned to Zira. She saw the change in his eyes immediately. "What is it?" she asked, her voice sharp. Taka explained what he had seen, what he had felt. He spoke of the adoration for Simba and the look on Mufasa's face. He confessed his fear for their future, for Nuka's place in a world that now revolved around a new son. Zira listened, her expression hardening. She had always seen the monarchy as a source of weakness, its rigid lines of succession leaving no room for those with different kinds of strength. "I told you," she hissed, her voice low and intense. "They will never see your worth, Taka. They see only the crown. Mufasa's son will be king, and his son after him. Where does that leave Nuka? Where does that leave us?" Her words were like sparks on dry tinder. The seed of resentment that had planted itself in Taka's heart began to sprout, watered by Zira's own bitterness and ambition. His dream of being a loyal advisor died, replaced by a desperate need to secure his own legacy. The name Taka felt weak, boyish. He needed a new name, one that reflected the wound he now carried. The world had scarred him, so he would become Scar. The plan began to form, not as a sudden burst of evil, but as a slow, creeping corruption of his original dream. He couldn't be the king's advisor, so he would be the king. He couldn't protect his family from the shadows, so it would drag the entire kingdom into the shadows with him. The hyenas, once a threat he would have fought as leader of the Lion Guard, now seemed like potential allies, fellow outcasts who understood what it was like to be denied a place in the sun. His love for Nuka twisted into a disappointed frustration at the cub's weakness. His bond with Zira morphed from a secret love into a dark alliance, and his relationship with Mufasa, once the cornerstone of his life, began to crumble under the weight of his growing jealousy. Every kind word from Mufasa felt like pity. Every royal duty, a reminder of what he had lost. It all came back to that one moment. One look at Mufasa, the proud father, gazing at his perfect heir. Simba, that single image, burned into his memory, was the catalyst. It didn't create the villain Scar overnight, but it shattered the hopeful Prince Taka, leaving a void that jealousy, fear, and Zira's ambition were all too eager to fill. The path to the elephant graveyard, the stampede, the murder of his own brother, it all began with a broken heart and a promise he no longer believed he could keep. And that is how one look at a father's love for his son changed not just a family, but the fate of the pride lands forever. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into the untold stories of our favorite characters, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.